This exhibit tells a before and after story, that of your career, which lasted for 25 years before you had to stop working due to osteoarthritis in your shoulders, and then the rebirth, as you call it, of your career after having shoulder replacement surgery in 2007. There are two drawings in particular in the exhibit that illustrate this story. The first one is Stone's family that was created in 2004. This was the last piece that you created before your surgery. And then the second piece is Free Fall 3 from 2008, which is the earliest piece included in the exhibit that you created after your surgery. Can you tell a little bit about these two pieces and the different times they represent?
Stone's family relates to the love affair I happen to have with Ireland. And an stone is a standing stone that you find all over Ireland, Scotland, Wales, parts of England. There's a tradition in Judaism where if you visit the grave of someone, you leave a pebble on the grave to let them know that you have been there. And so there is a very large pebble on one of these stones. It was a very difficult piece to make because arthritis had truly crippled me. So there's a lot less motion in this particular piece because my arm simply wouldn't move as much. After this piece, I did virtually nothing in the studio. I was crippled to the point of not being able to read for 3.5 years because of the pain just to turn a page. When I had the surgeries, and they were done 4 months apart in 2007, I had to relearn how to do just about everything as far as movement is concerned. How to pick up a pencil, how to pick up a glass, how to use a knife and fork. Those muscles get retrained and the brain muscle nerve connections get re-solidified. But in the studio, I simply started drawing parallel lines over and over and over again to see whether or not I could gain control. And I was using markers because they required absolutely no physical energy to leave a mark. Ultimately, I was using watercolor crayons with the markers. Then watercolor crayons over the markers, and then ultimately oil pastel over the watercolor crayon. So the piece Free Fall 3 shows my experiments with a paintbrush, which was a very different thing to move around, and I hadn't used a paintbrush since the fall of 1979. But the shapes in this, yes, there is a horizon line, there is a green sea, there are two earlier pieces that have this same kind of format. But what I noticed in the early stages of going from color studies to making a more serious piece is that the elements that I used to count on as being component parts of my work seem to have been broken into a lot of pieces, like you would break pieces of spaghetti and scatter them. They were deconstructed. They were made much smaller, and they stopped moving. They levitated, they hovered, they floated, but there was no evidence of motion. There was no animation, which I found both fascinating and a little perplexing because I had always enjoyed that evidence of motion that seemed to create itself in my earlier pieces. But if I think about the Stone's family piece, which is absolutely still life, face forward, no moving, smile at the camera. This piece does have more motion than that, but I had worked very hard to learn how to lay one color down on top of the other, to create edges. And one of the major differences had to do with I was no longer able to mount the boards on the wall and work standing up in front of them, swinging my arms like crazy. I was now sitting at a very large table, working with gravity as my friend rather than the enemy, and there were going to be some changes, if for no other reason than I was seated rather than standing.